No, just before we get on to the things that we're going to talk to today, I just want to introduce you to two things. Are you aware, Josh, that at the Sundance Film Festival, there has been recently displayed the first of two documentaries on our former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern? Are you aware of that, Josh?
No. Well, strangely, I haven't really
A
been following
documentary traversing former New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's leadership and personal life through home videos, archival footage, and fresh interviews has premiered at Sundance. It's been directed by Michelle Walsh and Lindsay Utz. That's an unusual name, isn't it? UTZ. And it covers Ardern's 5-year tenure from when she was elected as the leader of the Labour Party and going into the 2017 election to just 6 weeks out, it was just 6 weeks out from that election, to when she resigns as the Prime Minister of New Zealand, as the leader of the Labour Party. When was that? Late January 2023.
I suppose there'll be some taxpayer money put into that.
Now, no, there's no taxpayer money into this documentary. There is taxpayer money into a second documentary that is coming out. So there are two documentaries. This is the one which includes footage shot by Clark Gayford, the husband of the former New Zealand Prime Minister. In fact, he's credited, I think, as being one of the producers of this particular documentary. Now, the blurb that goes with it says that the filmmakers took the opportunity to tell the whole story, the highs, the lows, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I've had a chance to see a little bit of it. I must have just seen a short or something of it. But I have to say, I don't see an awful lot other than a hagiography, which is, how amazing is this woman? And at the end of the day, it includes an awful lot of home footage shot by Ardern's husband. I'm assuming, given that he's also got a credit as a producer, that there is some sort of perhaps commercial benefit from, I don't know, but that's the reality of it. The reason I say this is because the remarkable thing is that Jacinda Ardern is using the Sundance Festival still to promote, she says, her politics of kindness and empathy. And that is indeed her assessment of it. She said, I saw the final cut of the film yesterday, as she said this to the Sundance Festival on Sunday their time, Monday our time. I cried through most of it, she said. Oh, we would tend to cry through it too, Jacinda. I'm not sure if that's equivalent to laughing your own jokes, but I was very emotional watching it. I credit the storytellers for it. Well done, Clark. You got a bit of a shout out from your wife. I hope that the film would humanise politicians, those who are public servants in leadership, but I never thought it would humanise me. When I watched it, I saw myself as someone who was trying to do their best. And those were her comments to the audience, the adoring audience at the Sundance Music Festival. It's not music, the Sundance Film Festival. Listen, it wouldn't be so bad. And listen, you can do what you like. She's now safely ensconced in North America, earning funds over there from private interests and promoting her particular and peculiar brand of progressive politics. I don't have a problem with that. That's fine. You can do what you like. But it's still this enormous self-delusion running through her commentary and this particular documentary that she is a kind, decent, and empathetic human being. Now, you see, one thing she says when she was saying, I watched the documentary and it humanised me, it sure as hell didn't give her any sense of self-awareness, did it? It didn't. And the remarkable thing is that The Guardian, for example, this is a good example of progressive media throughout the Western world, that The Guardian, based in England, very left-wing, as you would expect, but has praised the documentary on the basis that it shows a different way of leadership and obviously makes the contrast to Donald Trump and says, wow, this is sort of trolling Donald Trump, I think, with some of the commentary that The Guardian and other critics have put together on this, number one. Yeah, I know, And number two, the other thing about this was that the people who were considered to be in opposition to her are all characterised as anti-vaxxers, all right, all characterised as anti-vaxxers who would eventually end up trying to stage some version of January the 6th or whatever it was in the New Zealand Parliament, and that particular protest, if you remember. So the media, in the response to this documentary, are suggesting that everybody essentially who opposed, and it's not denied in this documentary either, were wicked, self-interested, antediluvian troglodytes that had emerged out of some cave somewhere going anti-vax, 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 and that was entirely typical of the opposition that she was facing. And even in this documentary, it is portrayed as such by Clark Gayford and by the producers Michelle Walsh and this lady Utz, as irrational, that people who could possibly have opposed her leadership were simply irrational and motivated either by conspiracy theories and or misogynistic hatred. You know. Now it's I had to check what the date was today. It's the 29th of January 2025. It's now been 2 years since roughly 2 years since Jacinda Ardern resigned as the Prime Minister. But you know, there's not a hint of self-criticism, self-awareness, self-understanding, or of the damage that this woman created. Not to the so-called right-wing, troglodyte, cave-dwelling anti-vaxxers, but to the economy, to openness and decency and transparency into this country, and not an understanding that the majority of New Zealanders, not some distinct right-wing crazy minority with, as I said, misogynistic motives, but the majority of New Zealand rejected Jacinda Ardern, and that the real reasons that she stood down 2 years ago was that she knew she was being rejected. They'd done the polling. She could see it for herself. The Labour Party had come back to her and said, we can't win the election. She knew that heading into that particular Christmas of 2022. She knew that. She knew what it meant. She knew that she was being rejected on a massive scale by New Zealanders, not necessarily for her policies, but for her faux and fraudulent emotionalism that preached a whole series of false narratives about kindness and decency and treating people as you'd frankly like to treat your mother or your grandmother, when in actual fact she was quite happy just to wipe out vast segments and sectors of New Zealand and describe them as second-class citizens. She was happy to lie for a living about the effects of her mass medication regime. And gosh, I was one of those who was taken in by it. And she was extraordinarily happy to divide New Zealanders on the basis of race and culture as well. Her legacy is now being touched up by a state-funded documentary that's yet to be released, by now her own personal hagiography, lovingly curated in part by her husband, and by the left-wing media, whether they are Spin-Off in New Zealand, The Guardian in the UK, CNN, or it wasn't CNN, in actual fact it's the Variety magazine in the United States, or the Sundance Movie Festival. And I hope one day, and I don't know, maybe we're just too close to the event, but one day you would hope that history and the truth win out. Because sure as hell, both of those two concepts of factual truth and of historical analysis have died in a ditch in Sundance. And died there again, stabbed to death. They just staggered out of the ditch and just got stabbed to death again in that particular depression in Sundance in the United States of America. You won't go and see the documentary, I imagine. You might end up on YouTube or something like that, and then we can all have a damn good laugh. But I have to say, Jacinda, give it up, girl. Give it up. You know, learn some self-analysis. Learn to admit that part of kindness and decency and empathy is knowing when you've stuffed it up, is knowing when you weren't actually kind or empathetic. Sure as hell weren't empathetic to those people on the lawn, were you? Or any of the other people that you put out of jobs. You weren't empathetic to farming or the farming community in this New Zealand. You weren't empathetic to conservative Pākehā in this country who were going, why is everything suddenly changing without me having a say in this? You weren't empathetic to those businesses that you closed down in Auckland for a second time and in other parts of New Zealand when there was no good reason to do so. And you weren't empathetic this week when 8 people died from COVID. Along with hundreds, no thousands of other New Zealanders have died of COVID as well, which rather proves that the policy at the end of the day didn't work. So, give it up, girl. I know you can't. I know you've got this enormous mythology that you are now imposing upon a whole series of wokesters who'd like to believe that you are somehow the anti-Trump of the Western world. But there is no delusion like self-delusion. And girl, you've got it in spades. You need help. Those are my thoughts. What are yours?